This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
This week on Off the Record, the goal line is the state line for the Carolina Panthers as they plan to move to South Carolina. We'll have the latest from lawmakers in Columbia. North Carolina teachers getting ready for another big protest at the state capitol. But while they're in Raleigh, who's in the classroom? Charlotte police having second thoughts on when they shoot and why they shoot as the chief talks about revamping the use of deadly force. 10 Republicans running for Congress, but only one is running TV ads. We'll talk about the 9th District race and how to reach voters. And is there a doctor in the house? Wake Forest Medical School says it's expanding to Charlotte so you can finally earn your MD here in CLT. Off the Record's next on PBS Charlotte. Hi, I'm Jeff Sonnier. This is Off the Record, where we talk about the stories you've been talking about this week. And if you watch the news, read the news, or listen to the news, you'll recognize the names and faces around our table. Dedrick Russell from WBTV and Mark Becker from WSOC-TV. Thanks for being here. Also, Eli Portillo from the Charlotte Observer and Ashley Fahey from the Charlotte Business Journal. Thank you for being here. You can also join the conversation. Just email your questions and comments to offtherecord@WTVI.org. And welcome to our Facebook Live audience. You can comment, you can like us, you can share our Facebook post, you can send us a picture of your lunch. We just are glad that you're there. We appreciate you joining us here on Off the Record this week. Speaking of appreciation, Panthers showing a little love to the legislators down in Columbia this week, lobbying them. Hopefully in return they'll get multi-million-dollar packages of incentives, and we'll see if that move that we've been talking about so much actually takes place. Ashley, can we start with you and kind of bring us up to date on where the Panthers are at this point on their way to South Carolina?
Yes, definitely. So it seems there have been 2 economic impact reports that have been evaluated, one by the State Commerce Department, which is obviously very exciting, very big numbers. We're looking at more than $3 billion in impact, more than 5,500 jobs. And then, of course, we have another report that says that's inflated by about $2.7 billion. And we can't necessarily put a number on the number of jobs because we don't know yet. There's still a lot of questions and unknowns. That second report, which was commissioned by, of course, a state legislator who is but a stay on the bill, he, of course, had said, we don't know yet what kind of tax revenue we're going to be looking at. We don't know if the players and coaches are actually going to move to South Carolina. And I think these are the questions that everyone's been saying. We need to know a little bit more about the actual impact before we make a firm decision on these incentives.
Yeah, what we do know is that they've gone awfully public on the prospects of having the Panthers in South Carolina.
Which is unusual.
Yeah, I mean, the team doesn't show up at the state legislature to pose for pictures. The governor doesn't come out and make an announcement unless this thing is kind of a done deal. So, I mean, is the opposition just kind of, temporary?
It's serious when Sir Purr shows up, right? I think that maybe due diligence and the state senator who is opposing or questioning this, due diligence, I guess, is Dick Harpootlian, who we've known for years as a guy who's a former solicitor down there, that is the district attorney for a while.
Former Democratic chairman for the state, I believe.
And a very, I think it's fair to say, flamboyant and outspoken attorney. And he's going to speak his mind and probably get a little of the limelight while he's doing it. And he's raising these questions, which I think are probably good questions. $3.7 billion, I think, was the number they were talking about. That seems awfully large, right?
Well, this is the perennial question with these economic impact studies. And since you can't predict the future without making a set of assumptions, it really comes down to what do you assume? And what Senator Harpootlian has said is that the assumptions used in the state's report are way too optimistic. For example, they assume that every person on the Panthers payroll would move to South Carolina rather than some of them commuting. They assume that the the practice facility attendance would be roughly on par with that of the Dallas Cowboys facility, which is the most successful in the NFL. So when you just dial back those assumptions and you say, well, what if only half the people move to South Carolina? What if the attendance and other numbers generated are similar to the median for the NFL, not the best off the charts facility? Then the numbers start to look a lot more modest. But that's the same discussion that happens every time there's one of these incentives questions where states are offering tax breaks to companies. States tend to choose by far the rosiest scenario, and there's a lot of research out there that shows usually that's not what ends up happening.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting, Senator Harpootlian is obviously the most outspoken, most visible critic of this incentive package. But his own study, while it's smaller, it's $1.1 billion in impact to the state. So, while we're talking about something that's far less than what the governor's predicting, it's still $1.1 billion. I mean, that's a big impact for any state, any community. And I'm not sure that just because it's less than what the governor's calling for means it's insignificant or not worth the investment that South Carolina is being asked to make here.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think it's a win-win-win-win situation for them. I was talking with somebody who's employed by the Panthers and was there for the Jerry Richardson era as well, and he says, look, David Tepper's all about business and making money, and it makes business sense in many ways for the Panthers to do that. The tax incentives alone. I mean, South Carolina, it's no accident that they have gotten Boeing, that they've gotten BMW, that they've gotten these major facilities down there. They throw stuff, that is to say money, at these huge corporations, and the incentives are too much to walk away from.
And I guess it's all about the marketing and branding. It's the Carolina Panthers, one team, two states. And I guess people are capitalizing on that. And I guess South Carolina has been very aggressive in trying to get a piece of the pie and to spread the love. And so I guess with Coach Rivera down, shaking hands and kissing babies down there, I guess that shows something that, that they're halfway there.
Yeah.
An interesting point, too, though, about this bill is that, and this has been a sticking point, too, for Harpootlian, is that, this includes an interchange. That would be $40 million interchange. And he says, well, I have constituents who have been waiting on interchanges for years. So, and that's another point that I'm curious to see where that goes and whether that impacts what ultimately goes on.
Yeah, Gary Simrel is the House Majority Leader from York County in South Carolina, and what he has said is what we're offering the Panthers is not anything different than what we offered Volvo or BMW or GT Tire down in Lancaster, including things like you mentioned, interstate interchanges. So I think it's how you spin it. I mean, Senator Harpootlian says it's a giveaway. Representative Simrel says we're just offering the Panthers the same thing we'd offer a manufacturing company or an insurance company. Why should a professional football team be treated any differently, by us when we're trying to bring industry business to the state and turn those new industries into development.
Yeah. And with this, it's setting a precedent. So if you can spend upfront money immediately for a football team, then can you spend upfront money for education, for healthcare, for safety? So, so therefore, when teachers and whatever, protest at the state capitol, they have a leg to stand on because you say you did it for these teams who may not even move to South Carolina. What about us who have been here all along here in South Carolina? So this does set a precedent if this deal goes through.
Yeah, I took a look at the Dallas project, and a lot of people think of the Dallas project as the stadium there. That's not what we're talking about. 35 miles out of Dallas in Frisco, Texas, they have a complex comparable to what David Tepper wants to build in York County. It's got a hospital for sports medicine. It's it's like a theme park is too strong, but it is a huge development that includes a 12,000 seat stadium indoors that the team shares with local high schools and youth leagues and semi-pro sports. I mean, there's a lot of development there that is, it's themed with football, but I mean, if you took the football element out of it and, called it something else, you'd still have a huge development. And I think, regardless of whether it's the Panthers or another developer, it's an impressive kind of project to bring to undeveloped area south of the state line. I mean, it's a good project.
It's diversify. Diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Give the people what they want and give them a variety so they can come to the great Palmetto State. Right?
So let's just, before we leave it, let's flip it around. Why aren't we pushing harder here in Charlotte, in North Carolina? If it's all that, should we be doing more?
Well, or how did we get caught so far behind on this project? Obviously this thing is pretty far along in South Carolina. How did it get to that point without us apparently not even being competitive, for
Well, and
Well,
again,
even
kind
the
of
mayor is
development.
embracing this, right? Because she said that we're 2 states, 1 team, and she even came out with a statement embracing this this deal, proposed deal.
Yeah, and we all know that there's going to be some kind of request of government here in North Carolina locally and at the state level with the stadium, and we know that's coming at some point. Of course, we don't know yet when or what the number will be, but I'm not sure if that's playing into it, but that's certainly a factor we're all aware of.
Hey, can I throw in one other kind of crazy last minute thing that's kind of related to what you just said? There's a bill in Raleigh right now. It's the legacy employer bill or something. It only would cover, it's interesting, if you've been in business for more than 100 years and you're in an urban area and you want to move to a nearby rural area, this would give you incentives and money and that sort of thing. About the only business that fits the profile is Charlotte Pipe and Foundry, which is in uptown Charlotte, more or less adjacent to Bank of America Stadium.
Right.
So are we seeing the beginning of the long-term plan of if there is going to be a new stadium,
them
where
away
that
and-
new
yeah.
stadium might wind up if a big company like Charlotte Pipe and Foundry moves somewhere else? I mean, that's...
Well, they have a sizable amount of land, and that real estate is invaluable.
Oh my gosh,
I mean,
yeah.
you can't even imagine. They bought it in 2011 for almost $30 million. Today, it would be, I can't even put a number on it. It would be
Right.
much significantly higher, and of course, that would sweeten the deal because they own the land; they're not leasing it. But they are rumored to be looking at also jumping the border. So I think that's also part of why these incentives are in play. We've definitely heard, at least
Yeah.
at the CBJ, that they're looking to jump the border.
But once
They
again,
can move next to the Panthers.
Right there, you go.
but once again, if they jump the border or stay in the state and move somewhere else, that opens up existing land that's
Land.
got a different, a much different use to something, any sort of development, and it being so close to the stadium, it just makes you wonder if there's something
There's a
long-term
long-term
going
play
on
there,
here.
yeah.
Everybody kind of looking at this, different pieces in the puzzle and all that. So anyway, good discussion. Hey, let's talk about teachers. May 1st, they won't be there. They'll be out of the classroom. They'll be in Raleigh. We were told this week more than 1,300 teachers and staffers at CMS alone have already asked for the day off. So a lot of school systems are closing down for what is turning into an annual event. The question is, how effective is this annual event, I suppose?
Well, it works. It worked last year, and they say this is 2.0, and they say if it worked last year, let's do it again. So I guess it worked last year, meaning that that some people who were seeking re-election did not win because teachers said that, I talked to one teacher and they said last year it was about removing those policymakers who were not kind to teachers, and this year it's about changing policy. So we got like around 8 school districts already throughout the state
Right.
who have
big
shut
ones.
down.
Right.
The big
The
ones have
urban-
shut down.
urban districts for the most
exactly.
part,
So
yeah.
so they're going up there. Last year, 19,000 teachers showed up. We don't know how many teachers will show up this year, but obviously they're motivating the crowd and they're getting the job done. And they say that if it worked last year, then let's put a little extra sauce on it and let's do it again this year.
You went last year, didn't you?
I did.
Tell me what exactly are they doing up there on this day off, day out of the classroom?
Well, what they did, they marched for the students. They want student support, more nurses, more psychologists, more librarians. So they marched from the offices of the North Carolina Education Association. They marched from there and they marched to the state capitol. And then after they did that, then they went to lawmakers' offices, telling them that we need this, we need this, we need A, B, C, D. And then they had a big rally there, and they had people, speaker after speaker after speaker, telling them that we want it now. When did we want it?
Yeah.
We want it now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, mostly what they did was they were visible, right? They were on Facebook Live, they were on TV, they were all over, and how can you say no to teachers, right? Next, you'll say no to nuns or
Yeah.
something. I mean,
For the children.
It's for the children, it's for the I mean, so there's tremendous amount of just by showing up and being there, and creating that media event. There's tremendous pressure on lawmakers.
Yeah, and they're saying that we want to be counted because a lot of people who oppose that, they say, well, why don't you do it on a weekend, or why don't you do it on spring break? So teachers, they fired back and said that we've done that. In years past, we've marched on Saturday and we marched on spring break and nothing happened. So last year things happened and they said that, hey, we want to do it again, I guess. And they want to raise minimum wage, $15 minimum wage for your bus drivers, your cafeteria workers and things like that. They say that they need to be counted too and they need to show some love.
Well, first of all, the state already raised the minimum wage for all state employees to $15 an hour. It's already there, so I'm not sure who they're talking about that isn't already making $15 an hour if they're state employees.
Right.
But if we're defining success as getting unfriendly lawmakers out of office, congratulations, you've won. But year after year after year, we see this. Year after year after year, they don't get what they want. Year after year after year, they go back and say, we need this. It kind of looks more like theater than real policy change or meaningful change when it comes to the teachers' plight when it comes to more money.
Well, I think we're in a war of perceptions right now, and that depends on your point of view. Republicans and Republican legislators tend to look at the numbers and say, look, North Carolina has moved from near the bottom of the rankings in teacher pay to right about the middle, and every year we've pretty much improved in that. Democrats and a lot of teachers look at those same numbers and say, great, big whoop, we're near the middle. We're the 10th largest state. We're a growing state, a booming state that's made education a cornerstone of our growth. We should be at the top. We shouldn't be happy with being right near the middle of funding. So I think really a lot of this issue depends on how you perceive it. And you've got people on different sides of the aisle looking at the same sets of numbers, and some are saying, this is great, we should be celebrated for it, and some are saying, this is terrible and needs to improve. There are also some ancillary issues like this bill in Raleigh right now that would redirect teacher school supply funding. It would take about, I believe, $30 million or $40 million of that from the systems and give it directly to teachers at $400 per teacher. And
Kind of a shell game.
yeah, so there are, beyond the overall teacher pay issues, there are issues like that are being debated as well, and I think those side issues are going to play a big part in this.
And when you look at it, teaching has changed over the years. You have more students now who have challenges. So therefore, I can't teach you if you're hungry. I can't teach you, if you just witness a domestic, dispute between mother and father. I can't teach you if you witnessed a murder in your neighborhood. So therefore, teachers are saying that, before I can teach your ABCs, there's some mental and emotional and support. And even though the state is doing that, but teachers are saying more needs to be done. It needs to be more aggressive. And then they're still, dealing with things of the past. Teachers here in North Carolina they don't get paid more for having a master's, for having an advanced degree. So therefore, what oxymoron is that? Here we promote education, but then we don't celebrate education. Yeah, exactly. We don't reward it. So therefore, they're still dealing with issues of the past, and they're also dealing with issues of the future, and those issues of the future are not going to go away anytime
Let's
soon.
leave it there till May 1st, and we'll talk about
May
this
Day.
again, first
Yeah.
week of May, right here at the spot. Next week we'll be probably talking about what the police video shows in that police shooting out on 80s Ford Road a couple of weeks ago. But prior to that, the chief was talking this week about changing, perhaps, how the department approaches deadly force in the first place.
Yeah, and it really started before that. It started years ago, but I think that the chief really spoke to it when he spoke to a large group at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, I believe, after that shooting on Beatty's Ford Road, and he said, this is not good. I don't like these meetings. I don't like this situation, and it really comes down to a couple of things. And he talked about it this week. Maybe we need to look at our use of force again and how we approach these situations. And that term we've heard, de-escalation. Let's figure out ways to calm things down before we start pulling triggers, and we can read all kinds of things into that because that case is still under investigation, and they haven't said which way it will go, if the officer will be charged even perhaps or not. They haven't said that, but you can read that maybe he's saying he has some questions about that. He said he wasn't specifically commenting on that shooting, but he clearly has concerns, and the other concern he has is the other side of the coin. There's how police respond, but there's also the lack of trust, and perhaps a growing lack of trust in the police department. And that's a huge concern for him, one that he expressed the week before, saying, I'm frustrated when we go out and we investigate these shootings, and the victims of shootings, obviously who survived, then refuse to tell us who shot them. And things escalate, and they go back and get somebody, and we have another homicide. So clearly there are two sides of the coin. The community has to learn, work on trust issues, and the police have to work on, he's saying, I think, on how we approach these
Yeah,
situations.
he used the word revamping. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, and as you mentioned, their tactics...
revamp,
their
right?
tactic
Revise.
now involve de-escalation, but obviously, at this point, maybe the chief thinks that's not enough at least in the eyes of the public, at least in the eyes of the community that he's trying to build trust with.
Right, I think that's it. He's trying to rebuild that trust, and it's a tough go right now.
Yeah, I went through that transparency training a couple of years ago with CMPD, where they put you on, in the simulators, just like the police do. And boy, it's we can sit here and talk about it, but until you have a gun in your hand and you've got these situations in front of you, it's a difficult situation. And I know that they talked a lot in those sessions about de-escalation. But before we move on to another subject, next week, the body cam, the debate we have over the body cam video, is that going to change anyone's perceptions of what happened? I kind of hate
to be a skeptic, but first of all, one of the things the chief said and cautioned people is, even if you see the video, that doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
You have to put all these pieces together now. Again, try to read between the lines there. Maybe you get in trouble, but maybe that body camera video will be questionable.
And this all is going to be interesting because all of this is happening at the same time when they're trying to bridge the difference with the RNC coming next year.
Right.
So therefore, it's just these events keep happening, and I guess they want to make sure that everybody's on the same page when the RNC comes. So if anything does pop off, at least we'll have the trust of the community.
Right.
But this is just the plot thickens, as they say.
And on the Beatty's Ford shooting, at least next week we'll have some answers. Right now, all we've got is questions about what happened. We'll see for ourselves what happened, I suppose, at least. Charlotte's getting a medical school, a 4-year medical program that has been talked about for years. I didn't realize that Charlotte was one of the biggest cities in the country without a medical school. What's this going to mean for the city? For healthcare in general in town?
Well, it's a big deal, and I think what a lot of people have observed is when you have a medical school in town, a lot of doctors who go through there, they do their residencies locally, and then they go maybe stay in the city that they do their residencies in. It also would raise the profile as far as research, as far as institutional things like that go, which if we all think back to the Amazon bid, that was something that was talked about a lot, is Charlotte, we do have a research university, but they're still not quite at the level that even the Triangle has. And we know that they have medical schools. We know that they have a very good one, in fact. Right, right. So it is a big deal. Of course, now we still don't know the details. They're in an exclusive memorandum of understanding, and they're negotiating right now.
And this is Atrium and Wake Forest Medical Center.
That's right. Yep. So we'll have to follow this more throughout the year. But if all goes according to plan and it gets built, it is significant.
Well, I hate to dumb it down, but if I could use that phrase, but when Johnson and Wales moved here, right? We have a cooking school, and they said the restaurant scene is going to get better.
And it did.
And I think it did, right? So I think the analogy there is probably holds up, that if you have the medical school here, you're going to also have some of that.
And beyond just the doctors, like you mentioned with research, Charlotte tends to score very poorly compared to peer cities on measures like patents filed per capita, research grants, and venture capital funding per capita. In some of the statistics I've seen, we're right near the bottom in those measures, below cities even like Tampa that you don't think of as research centers. And a big part of that deficit that local leaders point to is the lack of a medical school, because the research that happens there, the patents that researchers file, the biotech companies that can potentially spin out of those as they grow and become a cluster that grows and feeds on itself, is really a big benefit, even beyond the training of medical professionals.
It's one of the reasons that Kannapolis likes the research campus up there, for the same reason, the kind of things that come out of that setting that become manufacturing or economic drivers for the community as well.
Right, and a city like Pittsburgh, this week I believe some of the statistics I saw, they were pointing to about $1 billion in annual economic impact from the research and other business activities associated with their medical schools and medical facilities there. So I think Charlotte leaders see this as a big untapped opportunity for the city to grow in those kind of ways that they're really always anxious to.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's one of those cities that does well in economic mobility too, and one of the reasons, if you read the reports, is because of the presence of large established medical schools. I guess that's another discussion for another day, but you know, it's like I said, all those things that happen, you know, offshoots from the main plant that ultimately could be real benefits for the city, even if you're not going to medical school. Hey, quick question. Why is Wake Forest doing this when UNC Charlotte and UNC decided not to do this because they didn't think they could make it work? Anybody have an answer for that?
I'm not sure. I mean, we do know that Atrium was trying to merge last year, and of course that didn't work out with UNC. But we do know Wake Forest has already a business
They have a
program
campus
here,
here
a
already,
law
right?
program here as well, I believe. So, you know, the timing may be right. And I think I've read some interviews from that market, Winston-Salem, that said they really want a foothold in the Charlotte market. It's a bigger market. It could be a more competitive option, I guess, for applicants who want to go to that school. And I believe the structure is that a potential student there would be able to select what campus they can go to, whether it's in Winston or in Charlotte, which then leads the question of, well, would we end up cannibalizing talent from the Triad? I don't know. But I don't know. I think there's probably more reasons to it than I'm aware of. But on the outset, it seems like it's an untapped market, as we know, and it's a great opportunity for them, I would think.
Yeah, feather in the cap, I would think. Yeah.
Right.
And somebody has to live in those condos we're building, right?
Well, next we're going to have a craft beer university right here. We need more breweries.
Yeah, well, yeah. If the medical school means more doctors, if the Johnson & Wales means more restaurants, then what else do we want more of? And let's have a school.
And this
right?
deal could lead to a merger as well. We
Yeah.
don't know the details of that yet, but that is certainly something that we're keeping an eye on.
Hey, we didn't get to the 9th District and the advertising that is and isn't going on there, but we will because we've got till May again to, you know, the primary. But good discussion today. Glad that you're with us here on Facebook Live. If you want to contact us online, of course, you can always email us at offtherecord@wtvi.org. Panelists, thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining us at home, and we'll see you next time on Off the Record.
A production of PBS Charlotte.